Domestic Operation Department, International Operation Department, Foreign Exchange Department, and other relevant regulatory arms. In my experience, the total number of reports that participating institution or intermediary financial institutions such as a bank or a finance company or a primary dealer has to submit varies in number. A big bank in the size of BOC, Commercial People's Bank, HNB, submits something like 180, 190 or 200 reports, various variety of reports per annum. That those reports include the daily reports, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, half-yearly, and annual reports. But a smaller bank might submit something like 130, 120, 130, 140 reports. When it comes to a finance company, it could be less. But still, there are reports that those to be submitted. And there are web portals to submit such reports online. LankaFin, Financial Reports, FinNet, and GoML. Those online reports, numbering is about 30 to 50% of the total number of reports to be submitted. And I chose these particular reports which are very relevant to compliance. Cash transaction reports over $1 million, a cash transaction when it happens, they have to be reported every fortnight, 1st to 15th and 16th to 31st. Within a week, the report has to be submitted through FinNet or GoML. Then inward electronic fund transfer report, EFTR in, and then outward electronic fund transfer report, EFTR out. Same over $1 million has to be submitted to the FIU on a fortnight basis. The suspicious transaction report, there is a specific tool to submit, and the password is with the compliance officer. And after the due investigations at the compliance department, with the business unit that reported such suspicious activity, and if necessary, a confidential discussion with the senior management or the CEO, MD, if it is a case where it will involve the reputation of the institution. However, such reports has to be submitted within 48 hours of the rising of the suspicion to the FIU. The confidentiality, the extra confidentiality that has to be maintained ensures that the party involved, the client or the customer, will not know who reported it, which bank, which finance company who reported it, they won't know. Only the FIU, and after their investigation, initial investigation, they will refer that to the relevant law enforcement authority. It could be CID, it could be narcotics, it could be bribery and corruption. It could be excise department. It could be customs, any other authority. They too have been asked to and then had ensured confidentiality so far. So the nature of the report and from whom the report was done is kept confidential. So the, any suspicious report, of course, cannot be bogus or with malice to anyone in a party, but will receive due attention of the FIU and the relevant law enforcement agencies. And as far as I can remember, there is a process. There is, under the FinNet, you can see at which level, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. Level 5 is the final solution or resolving through the court of law or meeting with the punishment to the culprits. That happens. You can monitor through the FinNet at which level such investigations are at. So it's fairly advanced system that we have. What I think we need to use it judiciously so that the malpractices, corruption, and various other socially unfriendly activities are eliminated from the society through such reporting. I think I did mention in the last presentation of the last Sunday or Sunday before that Sri Lanka has a very good record of using STR to combat the terrorist financing used by the LTTE and their associated funding mechanisms through the years 2005, 6, 7, and 8. In those particular years, there was 800, 900,000, 1,100, 1,200 such STR reports submitted to the FIU on an annual basis. Other periods, other times, there were only 100 or less per year. But that particular period, there were such big amount, 10 times more, reporting of STRs to the FIU, and they were also resolved, investigated and resolved, and appropriate actions were taken by the law enforcement agencies and the judiciary, so that we were able to, together the compliance officers of banks, FIU, law enforcement agencies, together were able to suppress the financing of terrorism through the banking channels. The other methods like Hawala Undial systems, there was no way of controlling, but still there were a significant reduction. So therefore, as you know, the huge organized funding mechanisms were controlled and brought to zero through the banking channels, and then there was significant impact through unorganized or unauthorized systems like Hawala Undial, and such a impact was created to the terrorism in this country. Not underestimating the skills and the efficacy of the security forces. The funding mechanism was controlled in such a tune that the LTT was not able to procure any more sophisticated weapons, spending high amount of money, because the SDRs were used as a weapon to control the terrorist financing on a meaningful manner. So that such credit should be with the compliance officers, FIU, and the law enforcement agencies for having done a wonderful job. So that's an answer to those queries that the contribution by the financial service industry to the efficient eradication of money laundering and terrorist financing using the laid down mechanisms. Suspicious transaction reports. I think I explained suspicious activity report the other day. A person can walk up to a branch of a bank or a finance company and then inquire about certain activity, and finding that it is difficult to launder the money that he is intending to, or pool the finances for terrorist activities, because of the controls and mechanisms employed, controlling mechanisms employed by such institutions, he walks away. So, but if the officials of the bank or the finance company is suspicious about the activity, although there were no transactions taken place, such activity can be reported. So therefore, although we call it suspicious transaction report in Sri Lanka, many other countries do have suspicious activity reporting. So such activity reported through STR mechanism could avoid money laundering and terrorist financing to a great extent. I think I reiterated an example, practical example, where some Canadian dollar checks was deposited at a bank but was not collected pending opening of an account in the name of the beneficiary of the checks to whom they were written to. But the proper investigations through the register of companies to see if such entity existed, that the registration of the company was bogus and fictitious. So therefore, such activity were able to be avoided. Then promptly reported to money laundering reporting officer. Strictly confidential failure to report is an offense, meaning when the banks and finance companies with huge number of branches, any suspicious activity taking place at a branch should be able to be reported promptly to the compliance department for the necessary investigation and prompt action. So for that, there are mechanisms, organized email arrangements, more simplistic manner, or most of the core banking systems that these institutions use provide for internal communications effectively. So if the compliance officer and the compliance department provide the template with minimal amount wordings to be typed before submitting or forwarding such reports confidentially to the compliance department, that will ensure that the reports are submitted promptly to the compliance department for investigation and onward transmission if necessary. Then confidentiality to be ensured, particularly the officer and the manager at the respective branch unit and the compliance department senior officials who handle such STR should be aware of the facts of a report such, that is coming through from a branch office. This is to ensure that the reporting done does not go to the ears of or knowledge of the party concerned, client or customer, or any outside party. If such information is pumped off to such a customer or client, it will be tipping off. It's another criminal offense which attracts some more penalties or financial penalties and jail sentences. So tipping off also should be avoided at any cost, because such activity can bring in ill reputation to the institution, definitely. So STR reporting mechanism should be constructed, constituted, implemented with the full knowledge of the compliance officer and the compliance department, and with the help of the IT personnel, IT division, IT department, so that necessary confidentiality is maintained and efficiency in reporting is maintained, and ease of reporting particularly is maintained. Thereafter, archiving such reports, because sometime later, few months later, there can be inquiries from the FIU, police, or in law enforcement agency, or maybe even the court of law. So therefore, archiving such reporting is also of paramount importance, so that any successors to the compliance department can carry on the cooperation extended to the regulators and the law enforcement agencies, and protect the reputation of the institution, so that you win the confidence and the cooperation of the regulator, law enforcement agencies in the years to come, in the future, so that even if you happen to by mistake do or negligence, if there was such a mistake, a proper explanation could be provided to the law enforcement agencies or the FIU, and sort out the matters to the best possible outcome expected out of such. There are experiences, some of which more details cannot be discussed publicly, but however, the best of relationships maintained with the FIU law enforcement agencies had paved way to avoid some critical points which would have gone otherwise against the bank or finance company. Such cooperation, such friendship matters in resolving those minor things, but however, to put matters straight. Sanction screening. This is another angle that the compliance department should be focusing on. There are suspicious name lists. There are Sri Lankan lists, there are UN, United Nations, European Union and USA suspicious name lists. And as shown at the bottom, there are companies in the world of software providers in the world, such as World Check, Orange, and most of the main software vendors, core banking systems in the world, which provide one more composite of this suspicious name list, because they are live lists. They have to maintain. There are new names added on to the suspicious business activities, and there can be names deleted or taken out of the such list. So your transaction verification, even though you use a software system or dedicated email safety software systems or your core banking systems, if you can organize the names of suspicious activities which the FIU calls in for reports on a weekly or monthly basis, I guess to my knowledge, there can be about 15 to 20 or 25 names per month on whom the FIU needs clarification of your relationship. You would know whether they are inquired for suspicious activity or not. Such names, if you can add on to a list and maintain such list on a computer-friendly manner, such list can be verified with each transaction, each new account open on an electronic basis, on a computer-friendly manner, whether it is a suspicious name or not. So likewise, there are names published by the United Nations, names published, list of names published by European Union, there are a list of names published by the US. Such name list, if they can be maintained, very well. So this is also an avenue for a enterprising business entrepreneur to collect such names and then maintain such systems, of course, on a live basis, adding on new names and then deleting the names which have been cleared, and then such facility in a computer friendly manner, if such services can be provided to the banks and finance companies, it's a good business. It's a good business activity, so that you help the bank or finance company to check the transactions and the new clients, whether they are suspicious or not. So it's another business opportunity for a young entrepreneur who would want to think of it in that line. So in other words, you become somebody like World Check or Orange on a business aspect, so that it is possible for any entrepreneur to create some facilities for the financial services industry. Asset freezing. Financial Intelligence Unit is empowered to issue freezing orders on account balances, financial instruments, or any other assets identified or suspected to be proceeds of money laundering or financial terrorism by Prevention of Money Laundering Act and the Financial Transaction Reporting Act. There are many practical examples, starting from the Tamil Rehabilitation Organization or TRO, on whose accounts the freezing orders were issued. So almost all the banks in Sri Lanka, operating in Sri Lanka, had account for them. So every bank, any employee in compliance department throughout the island, any bank would have had the experience of handling such freezing orders and remitting such collected balances, frozen balances, to the consolidated fund maintained by the government of Sri Lanka. And to my knowledge, I think the TRO had something like 21 billion rupees in total frozen money, which were sent to the consolidated fund. And time and again, there were many other accounts on whom the freezing orders were issued by the FIU, and the participating institution has to abide by such orders. Firstly, could be a message over the telephone or email addressed to the CEO, MD, or compliance and or compliance officer. And those messages are extremely important. The written instructions will follow, but the FIU is able to implement such freezing orders on verbal, electronical, or other means which can be conveyed promptly pending written instructions. So such freezing orders, handling of such freezing orders, too had a little bit of practically important situations. I can remember on one such freezing order on a customer coming out of Mana. A freezing order was issued by the FIU that customers' balances when frozen, because the compliance officer has the right and obligation to communicate direct to the particular branch office, asking them to freeze the balances, and that balance should remain intact cannot be changed thereafter. Only the credits that are coming to the account can go into, but no, there cannot be any debit going into that account. So there were a prominent politician was trying to call the compliance and then asking the reasons for freezing and then whether it cannot be waived, and it's a laughing matter. But you know, in Sri Lankan politics is that. So thereafter, the for a week or two, the telephone call continued, but had to be avoided for obvious reasons. So such incidents also took place, but the financial professionals have to be mindful of the professional obligations and then expedite their duty as per the directions issued by the regulator. Politically exposed people. This is again a subject which can be spoken at length. Politically active individuals who have been entrusted with a prominent public function and representing a country, for example, head of state, senior politician, bureaucrats, they carry a higher risk, such as a potential risk of corruption and bribery. More scrutiny over transactions is vital, as they can become sanctions very easily. So it is required to have an enhanced customer due diligence for the higher risk PEPs and their family members and connected parties. Constant monitoring is very much required. So maintaining such names and the name list is again another difficult task for the compliance department. So for which there were many initiatives like connecting with the Secretary General of Parliament for the names of the active politicians, and also the Secretary of the Department of Ministry of Public Administration for the names of Pradesh Sabhas and the local government authorities like urban councils, municipal councils, and Pradesh Sabhas. So it's another task like the maintaining of suspicious activity names. So it could be it could be treated as a suspicious activity name list, but many of the PEPs or bureaucrats could be genuine citizens, but knowing the Sri Lankan standards, you can expect many of them to be on the wrong side as well. So therefore, customer due diligence and the enhanced due diligence aspect has to be performed effectively. The difficulty arises when the names of the family members and the acquainted parties to be vetted or identified. So in not only the public entities that we spoke of, it can, even in the case of private companies also, there can be incidents of such events. I can remember in one of the companies, a conglomerate, the key person was buying shares through the Colombo Stock Exchange, adding on his weight over the other shareholders, and after having bought shares of certain companies in his name, in his family members' names, relatives' names, finally resorted to buy shares in the name of a loyal employee, a storekeeper. He had bought such a big amount. The value amounted to a couple of billion rupees. So finally, when the matter was to be investigated and decided at the court of law, the person in the middle declined that they were his shares. But when the shareholder, who was the storekeeper, was called in for investigations, he revealed that he did not know anything about the shares, and he was just asked to sign some forms by his boss, who is the key person accused. So because of the conflicting evidence, the court decided that the share should be totally unencumbered, given to the storekeeper, because it is his right. They are in his name. So overnight he became a billionaire, who just being a loyal member, loyal employee of that businessman. And finally, his loyalty to the businessman continued, I think. But however, the bankers who operate financial transactions for such customers should be aware of what is going through, because storekeeper employed at a very low level in the ranking, how can such a person become a billionaire? Because there can be a beneficial owner or ultimate beneficial owner who is somebody else. So such activity should be verified, scrutinized with a investigative eye. So in the next presentation, I have some listed unlawful activities, but you can add those activities that you think is suitable. But for verification purposes, this type of personnel should be brought under the microscope and dealt with in a manner suitable, probably through STRs, for the law enforcement agencies to investigate. So what is the social impact of criminal activities? Increased crime and corruption, fear and instability in social life. If the participating institutions, banks and finance companies, the intermediaries of the financial transactions, do not perform their duty well by investigating into the transactions for the beneficial owners and the source of funds, etc., etc. Naturally, the crime will increase, the corruption will increase, and in the society, fear and instability will be the order of the day. Living in a country like Sri Lanka, you would definitely know for even to obtain a simple service through a local government office or Pradesh Sabha or whatever the other institutions, things are not straight. For example, if you want to build up a house, you obtain a building plan from architect, and then you need to get it approved by the local authority and the urban development authority prior to building. And after building, construction work completion, you need to obtain a certificate of conformity or COC. To those who have gone through such activity would recall how difficult they are, because those individuals who want to evaluate and approve such building plans and then COC certificates, they expect favors financially and or otherwise, which has to be hidden or under the carpet, under the table. So those are the increased crimes. Whereas other countries, other developed countries particularly, such approvals and then certificates are mere formalities. But however, if there is any non-conformity, yes, those has to be corrected. The corrections apart, but however, after the application for approval or certificates, it takes a huge amount of time, which could be done in half an hour, 1 hour, or half a day, or maximum 1 day's work, might drag on for several months. This is the social impact. If you measure the country's development through a scale of GDP or gross domestic product, these type of activities add on to the building constructions, housing constructions, and various other development activities add on to the GDP. But because of these socially unfriendly activities and increase of crime and corruption, those development activity is not taking place at the desired or expected level of happening. So they just are dragged on by these unscrupulous, corrupt officials. So social impact is such that the country's development or increase in GDP is reduced or is not as expected. Then international consequences and foreign investment. Naturally, for obtaining any project obtaining approval on any project through corrupt officials or politicians will deter any foreign investment coming in. Isolation by international community, decreased sharing of investments will happen, and country or economy will starve for investment. Necessary economic activity will not take place, so investment activity will not take place. So the entire society, the citizens are deprived of the best of the living standards because of this corrupt and criminal activities. Weakened financial institutions, decreased reputation and profitability. Decreased reputation. When such corruptions and crime cannot be identified by the participating institutions or financial institutions, banks and finance companies, the reputation of such companies decrease. The economic activities will decrease and thereby the profitability will decrease. So it is a bounden duty of each and every financial professional, particularly the compliance community, to check and then eradicate such crime and corrupt activities or transactions from the financial landscape. So the compromised economy and the private sector. Economy is deprived of valuable transactions, and the private sector too is impacted. Less vibrant private sector and its contribution to the economy. All right. Strategic compliance. The way that the compliance function has to be organized strategically, strategic compliance, because compliance, after all, is the function that guides the business activities participating institution on the correct compliant manner, leading to positive results. Define a clear compliance vision and strategy. There is a vision for the organization, but similarly, compliance officer and the compliance department should be able to draw up a compliance vision and a strategy, particularly to train the entire workforce, employees, and agents who represents your organization, and to share the compliance vision and the strategy with them, and make them aware and educate them on the role that they need to be playing in achieving the compliance culture that you explain through the compliance vision, objectives, and the strategy is strategic compliance. We spoke of many directions, many angles identifying the suspicious activity and reporting to the compliance, and complying to the report submissions to the regulators and the law enforcement agencies when required. More importantly, in dealing with the customers, clients on business angle, on business activities, and how to interact with such customers and clients and extract vital information leading to successful business activity, successful business venture with the customer. And we spoke of risk and return. Any activity in a relationship, the risk that is undertaken by the institution and the return or the profitability from for those transactions and relationships that the institution would expect and would materialize finally. Those are strategic compliance. The leveraging compliance in strategic decision making. There are strategic planning committees, strategic business committees at the board level and at the senior management level. Compliance is a regular participant in those committees. So therefore, in any strategic decision that is going to be discussed, that will be discussed, maybe new products, new account openings, new relationships, new business activities, new business angles, new business ventures. Compliance need to strategize the positive thinking on the compliance to internal and external regulations. So this is strategic compliance, leveraging compliance in strategic decision making. Then mature compliance functions has a seat at the table to assess and influence strategic decisions. Now, seat at the table is the participation by the compliance, maybe the compliance officer or any other senior officer from the compliance at such strategic planning committees, strategic business committees at the board level or senior management level or at the executive level to make representations and understand the business activity pending or proposed, and the level of compliance required has to be strategized to assess and influence strategic decisions. So this is high-level planning, and therefore compliance should be at an adequate seniority level in each institution to influence such business decisions. Such business decisions sometimes need, not sometimes, always need the approval or the sign-off from the compliance to be executed or to be put into practice. That means if any business activity is planned and proposed to be rolled out, if it meets with contradiction for the level of compliance required, the compliance should be able to stop or stall such activity being implemented until those irregular or those irregularities are straightened out or the compliance matters are sorted out. Merely to protect the institution from bad reputation from the regulator, general public, or the shareholders. So the compliance decision becomes final in such business activity. Enable risk-oriented approach to compliance. We discuss the risk and return. Yes, it is a function of the risk department or chief risk officer to identify and evaluate the risk. Identify and evaluate the risk and mitigate the risk that whatever to the level that is possible and manage the risk. And then finally avoid the risk by taking action or the concept of de-risking. However, compliance department should be aware of the level of risk that is undertaken and then also should be aware with the level of return that is being brought in by such customer, such product, and such process or service. Identify risk and prioritizing compliance monitoring program around them. It's a big process. It should be smartly handled. Identify risk and prioritize compliance monitoring program around them. Predict and detect unknown risks. Compliance data are rich in business intelligence. They offer invaluable insights into business processes and performances. Compliance data are rich in business intelligence. They offer invaluable insights into business processes and performances. Utilize the compliance chain to drive improvements. The compliance chain on a strategic form is not only the compliance department and the chief compliance officer, but the entire workforce, all the employees are part of compliance. So much so that large institutions appoint a local compliance officer or LCO at each branch office or each business entity, the senior most officer or the manager to be the local compliance officer to carry out the responsibilities of local compliance officer for that branch office or the business unit. So therefore, utilize such compliance chain to drive improvements. The entire compliance chain must be thinking alike. They must be ready to acquire business and inculcate the compliance culture, inculcate the compliance culture so that it is possible for the new business activities in a compliant mode to take place. If at any unit they feel that there's a business opportunity, but there is compliance issues that arise, they can be escalated to the compliance department and chief compliance officer for remedial action. There are many examples of resolving such compliance issues amicably, sometimes with the consultation of the regulator or the senior management or the board of directors, and conclusion of successful and productive business products, business processes, which have become very popular, and therefore the compliance chain is effectively used to drive improvements. Utilize compliance data in suitable ways to add value to their business and industry. So this becomes the knowledge and skill of the compliance of a particular institution would contribute in a suitable way to add value to their business, not only to their business, to the entire industry as a whole. So another dimension, futuristic compliance. When we are in a effectively changing world, technologically, business processes wise, there should be futuristic compliance planning as well. Global regulatory environment has been increasingly in a state of flux, meaning the regulation evolve, regulatory environment evolve day by day because of the changing business models, technology, and the business processes. Particularly in banking and financial services, in areas such as cybersecurity, corruption, bribery are subject to increasing regulatory enforcements. Such things as eKYC and vKYC that we discussed last Sunday need to be planned properly, understood the regulatory environment, particularly the thinking of the regulator on such new development has to be evaluated and taken into consideration when implemented in your organization. I'm personally aware such new developments, when explained with strategic moves to comply with the regulatory expectations, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka particularly, and any other regulator would love such explanations and new proposals to adapt and enhance business activity. I can bring in one clear example. When we joined to Cargill's group to create the Cargill's Bank. The Cargill's Bank, the strength was the Cargill's food chain, and there are 300 plus outlets to reach the customer. Being an infant bank, there were no way that a branch network of 300 plus to be created overnight or within a short period of time. So we were thinking how to convince and be compliant with regulatory provisions and win the confidence of the regulator to provide banking services through the Cargill's Food City 300 plus outlets. So we sat down and then planned. Finally, we were able to convince after several presentations to the deputy governors and the bank supervision and we need to discuss some other aspects which might take a little longer. I thought of discussing with you a list of unlawful activities which will help in your assignment as well as on your day-to-day working life. And thereafter, I'm hoping that I can explain to you some of the risk measurement criteria, including not small, including a model to evaluate the risk as required by the rule number 1 of 2016 and rule number 1 of 2018. The Gazette notification section issued by the FIU, which I shared with you last Sunday. I think the Gazette notification and the direction by the FIU, rule number 1 of 2016 and rule number 1 of 2018 was shared with you. So I want to discuss some practical angle with you on that, which will help you to design a model in your organization, evaluating the risk arising out of the customer relationship, the products that you offer to the customers, the services that you offer to the customers, and the processes that you employ to connect the customer and your products and services. Finally, the risks of all those 3 or 4 activities taken as on a connected or weighted average basis to reflect upon the entire organization as the risk number. So let's discuss such things after the break. So now it is 10:30. Can we meet at 11 o'clock? Before that, are there any questions arising, please? Yes? Any questions? Hello? No questions? Very strange. Last Sunday and Sunday before, we had so many questions. All right. Anyway, please have a cup of tea and then get reinvigorated to ask some questions after the break. So we'll meet at 11 o'clock. After the break, I'm sure you would have had some encouragement to ask more questions. So I'm going to provoke you to ask questions with the next few slides. Before that, have you got any query or question with regard to the assignment?
Can we have your contact number, sir? So then we will get some help from you regarding the step.
Yes, my contact number, if you can write down, please. I'll just can tell you 0777 562 019. But I think most effective way is to communicate via email. If you have any question, please type your question and send it to my email. I can also reply by the same way so that you are able to read through the written form of your answer for your query. Okay. So have you got any other particular query on the assignment? I hope most of you are in the middle of writing it, because today is 20th. By another 10 days time, you must be concluding the assignment writing.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
That the slides that we already discussed, that the background is in orange color, that is for identification. I'm telling you that
Yes.
AML CFT through KYC, that the PowerPoint what you have sent it to us had only 32 slides there, but I think you have discussed it further today. That I don't
Right.
know how.
I added on the strategic compliance and the futuristic compliance. I'll ask Menaka to upload the full thing to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. So, have you got any query about assignment? I think I suggested subtopic called mindfulness. There were a couple of calls and emails asking me what it is. Does anyone want more clarification? To those people who asked the question, I sent a reply.
Yes, sir.
Yes? You need more clarification on that?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Now, basically, mindfulness that I expect, what I wrote as subtopic is expecting you to write something on the proper understanding of the regulation. Say, for instance, for example, the Financial Transparency Reporting Act section number 2006 section number 2 indicates the requirement, and subsequent gazette notifications and directives indicate about 10 to 15 items of a customer information that should be obtained. So those information, KYC information, for the namesake, because the Parliament Act and the directives from the FIU says for the banks and finance companies to obtain a record, they do obtain a record for the namesake. But when it comes to real practicing of the relationship activity with the customer, hardly those customer KYC points are referred to or understood. They may be saved or archived in your core banking system or the computer or wherever they are. If it's a written form, maybe in a piece of paper, in a file. But when it comes to day-to-day transaction with the customer, whether you resort to or recall those KYC information and whether they are used in your transaction or transaction that are planned or discussed. Now, ideal situation is that the law expects, the regulator expects, the political authority expects the full digestion of the so-called KYC information obtained out of a customer to be used in the transactions that are being concluded, the transactions that are being planned or discussed, they should be used in full. I was referring to an example where a lady going for a meditation program and seeing that her house was burgled by thieves when she was away. She employs a person, security guard or a watcher, and the employment contract between the watcher and the lady is that she must look after the house and protect the house. But the security guard instead, what he does is, he thinks that he was asked to watch the house when the thieves come next time and then takes the valuables away, he watches. He does not take any action. And finally, when the lady returns from the meditation program, she finds still the house was burgled, despite the employment contract with the security company or the individual security watch caretaker. So like that, for the namesake, if you are asked to take the KYC information and keep it aside and continue your normal course of business without identifying the money laundering, without identifying the terrorist financing, or without identifying the usefulness to the society or the relationship, and instead the harm that brings into the society by that relationship, if it is not identified and mitigated and then turned into a positive relationship, so that is called mindfulness. Understanding the meaning of the regulations and what are they, why were they prescribed in the first place by the regulator or the political authority. It is merely to protect the customer, to protect the society, to protect the economy, and to be very useful to the economy. So that is what I meant by mindfulness. Now I guess you understand better. Do you? Or you may convert into a different subtopic of your choice. But the meaning that I want you to write on is that understanding the law properly, understanding the regulatory requirement properly, and explaining what is required. All right. Any other question on the assignment? How much have you written on the assignment so far? Half of it? 1/3 of it? Or 1/4 of it? No answer. Well, if you have no question, no, if you don't have any more questions on the assignment, we shall proceed with this slide presentation. Can you all see this slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Okay, I have listed down the unlawful activities going by my experience and then going by the rules, regulations. There are about 5-6 slides here, or 7 slides. I want you to understand each one of them and then add what you think if I have not included any, or amend if you think that what I indicated needs amendment, or delete if you think it's unnecessary. Because I think so that going by my long-term experience, this kind of listing of unlawful activities also will be helpful in training your workforce, employees, or when you are undertaking your training of branch and head office staff training, or even the senior management training. You can use this for their knowledge. And on more practical terms, I think you can make a checklist of such unlawful activities and provide to each and every officer in the front office or back office, and then ask them to tick against each of them with regard to each customer relationship. And thereby you will be able to identify whether that particular customer relationships involves any of these activities. If any of these activities are involved, they are to be corrected, because those type of customer relationships will definitely bring in ill reputation to your organization. You will be committing a violation of the regulation by facilitating such unlawful activities. So therefore, I feel that it will be helpful in not only training your own staff, but facilitating your staff to equip them with a checklist to identify or match the activities of your respective customers against these. And if they're not doing, yes, very well. But if any one of them are involved or go very close to one of these, then you can refer to whatever the remedial actions, starting with negotiating with the customer, the social friendliness, and then regulatory compliance level of his or her activities. This could be really a checkbox type verification. So let's start. Unlawful activities. I want you to get involved in this discussion, please. Just see whether you understand, you would want to change, amend anything. Unlawful activities. Number 1, manufacture, trafficking, import, export, and possession of dangerous drugs under the Dangerous Drugs Ordinance. It's very clear And I guess in the present context of our country, it is a rampant issue. So much so that yesterday news broke out that 52 kilograms of narcotics and other varieties of dangerous drugs have been detected on the down south area involving a police officer as well, sub-inspector of police. So under the guise of protecting the law by the police officers, they resort to such activity as well. So unlawful activity number one is dangerous drugs or narcotic drugs, manufacture and trafficking, import, export, and possession of dangerous drugs. Now, apparently, those large quantities of drugs are being imported to the country, to the island. We are surrounded by a sea, but still we are unable to stop it. They have been ferried maybe from India or some of the neighboring countries through the sea. And any one of you in a bank or a finance company maintaining an account relationship for such individuals, and along with the analysis of the same news item, I heard the police spokesperson was saying that there had been 17,000 individuals identified involved in this type of activity, dangerous drugs and narcotics trade, import and export. They have identified 17,000 individuals. Who can say that out of the 17,000 individuals, none of them are banking with you in your bank or in your finance company? They may be showing a different type of transactions or different type of portrayal of their business and activity to you. But there can be some clues for you to identify. So I thought it is a very good point to do a checklist. And number one is manufacture, trafficking, import, export, or possession of dangerous drugs. Number two, another rampant activity in Sri Lanka, solicitation and or acceptance and or giving bribes or inducements and or involvement in acts of corruption. Soliciting or giving a bribe is not an economic activity which creates economic value to the country, economy, or the society. So soliciting and or acceptance and or giving bribes or inducements and or involvement in an acts of corruption, it can be at various levels of corruption. So much so that the debt burden of the economy of the country is something like 30 or 32 trillion rupee. And do you think that that volume of loans or other way of financial assistance obtained by the country, there are development activities taken place in this country? Definitely not. I heard one of the eminent person explaining that the amount of the foreign debt obtained for development of this country, the amount of money is adequate to develop half of India as well. Not only Sri Lanka, half of India. So the value of foreign assistance loans obtained to develop the country has definitely not gone into the development work. So thus creating the accumulation of funds on a selected powerful individuals and the poor community, which is the majority, 80-90%, are struggling to live probably hand-to-mouth living by a majority, but lavish spending by a handful of people. Income disparity. And that is being facilitated by this particular activity of bribes, soliciting and giving. So the slightest approval, people in power, people in authority, without any bribe, they wouldn't dare to move a paper or file to for the level of approval until the bribes are organized and given. So such things must be really checked with each and every account relationships. Third one, activities relating to unauthorized possession or use of guns, firearms, offensive weapons, explosive and including bombs. So they are mostly associated with terrorism. But at the same time, they are also associated with the first two that we discussed, the dangerous drugs, and then also soliciting bribes by powerful people. You find so many people driving luxury vehicles with escort, private or police escort with weapons. Why should they travel around with such weapons and escort if they have done no crime, they have not done any harm to anyone? Those are unnecessary things because they are not living in a jungle with wild animals. They are living with human beings. So they cannot expect any harm unless they have done something wrong. So fourth one, exchange control violations as indicated in the Foreign Exchange Act number 12 of 2017. As we explained before, Foreign Exchange Control Act Exchange Control Act in 1953 was drafted to preserve the foreign exchange reserves of this country without being dragged out unnecessarily. And it was a euphoria of control regime, whereas it worked against when the foreign investors wanted to invest in this country and then take their money out, they were subjected to the control. So they finally, in the year 2017, they managed to bring in a Foreign Exchange Act, eliminating the control aspect. However, still creating a positive environment for foreign direct investment in this country is far from positive results. One of the key features of Foreign Exchange Act number 12 of 2017 is they facilitate inward transfer of foreign funds through IIA account, inward investment accounts, and also they facilitate outward investment by Sri Lankans through OIA, outward investment accounts, and authorize the licensed commercial banks and licensed specialized banks to act as authorized dealers to facilitate imports and exports and other related activities. However, there was another category created called restricted dealers. Even if anyone wants to accept foreign currency notes, the so-called money changers on the street corners, and give the customer rupees, in other words, converting foreign currency notes to rupee funds, or the other way around, when someone wants foreign currency to be taken out by buying rupees or selling foreign currency notes, they need to be obtaining authorization from the Exchange Control Foreign Exchange Department of Central Bank of Sri Lanka, called restricted dealer license. Restricted dealer license. There are 2-3 conditions laid down for the awarding of restricted dealer license. First, there should be at least 3 directors or initiators with whom there is proven experience and knowledge of foreign exchange activity, with a minimum capital of 15 million rupees. Minimum capital of 15 million rupees for each outlet. And then each and every transaction should be recorded and reported promptly to the Foreign Exchange Department online. So for that purpose, the restricted dealer officers must be equipped with recording devices, not only voice recording, but the video recording devices as well. And each and every transaction has to be reported through an online portal to the Foreign Exchange Department and the International Operation Department. Such controls, if they can prove some infrastructure, the restricted dealer license can be obtained. Still, the inward investment accounts facilitated through a bank, I think there is provision for finance companies also to operate inward investment accounts if they have foreign contacts, or if they can source foreign exchange coming into the country. And the most popular product these days, currently, is the special deposit account. Special deposit account, where foreign exchange brought into the country through IIA accounts or inward investment accounts can be paid 6.5% interest for US dollars. This is equivalent to a rupee FD's rate. Although the London interbank offer rate in the international market is something like 0.25% or 0.3%, 0.25% or 0.3%. And fixed deposits for 3 months, 6 months can be in the international market about 2 to 3%. The central bank is going to pay the bank who opens the SDA account at 6.5%, the difference between 6.5% and the 3% or whatever the usual FD rate. So there is an encouragement for Sri Lankans living overseas or foreigners to bring in their foreign exchange through inward investment accounts and opening special deposit accounts in Sri Lankan banking sector at around 6.5% per annum. Where usual FD rate 2 to 3% is paid by the bank, and then the balance 6.5% minus that the bank's FD rate, that quantum is paid by the central bank. So last couple of months, every month, every succeeding month or the other, there have been incremental figures reported that special deposit accounts are gaining popularity, especially because of the financial incentive that is being paid. So therefore, Foreign Exchange Act number 12 of 2017 is encouraging Sri Lankans living abroad and then also foreigners living abroad to invest in Sri Lanka. So that because of that, there are a lot more transactions. But of course, they need to be verified for the source of funds, legitimate origin of funds, to avoid money laundering and terrorist financing activities. Sourced funds being brought into the country. Then fifth one, conduct of prohibited schemes such as pyramid schemes. You know what is a pyramid scheme? Where it is again without any social or economic value addition, a ring of promoters collect funds from unassuming or unsuspecting public, and then they make the first ring, second ring, third ring of people to mobilize the next ring, next customer, and then the first customer is paid out of the receipts of the second ring of customers. Finally, the promoters collect the wealth of funds, pool of funds, and they resort to their private activities or personal activities without allocating such pool of funds to the social benefit, to the economic activities in general. So the concentration of funds within few hands for their for their personal well-being rather than to social well-being. So those are also called unauthorized deposit taking, unauthorized gathering of funds or pooling of funds, which are prohibited by the regulator. And if you see such accounts being operated through yourselves, through your bank, through your finance company, they need to be stopped by negotiation, by pointing and verifying the source of funds. So much so that during the last couple of days, I saw some emails and some other social media, some groups of people collecting 1,000 rupees each or something, some in today's context, a small amounts for individuals, purporting that they're supporting the COVID infected families or the people displaced through the recent heavy rains and floods. And they indicate certain banks' name and accounts for the 1,000 rupees to be credited. So in authorizing or in opening such accounts, and then when the accounts operations show that 1,000 rupees from various unknown parties are credited to those accounts, there is a great need for the compliance. Firstly, the branch or office who maintains such accounts, and then compliance to verify whether they are permitted transactions. Such pooled funds may or may not go into serve the COVID affected families or families displaced through flood or heavy rain. There is a possibility that they are not very well accounted. They are not in the form of audited accounts in the form of books. And finally, if and when they are investigated, the bank or finance company who opened such accounts and allowed credits to such accounts by unknown parties around the world, around the country, may be called upon to explain. So those are called unauthorized accumulation of or pooling of funds. So if you all have any such accounts, please go through the regulatory aspects and the compliance. And I would suggest take appropriate action. And the sixth one, transnational organized crimes such as credit card frauds, trafficking of arms, computer and internet related crimes. There are reputed countries, organizations for this type of crime, especially some of the African countries, including Nigeria. And in the past few years, we have seen some of those foreign nationals who come to Sri Lanka as well, and then log into the cheap hotels, and then they walk along to each and every ATM machine that they can set their eyes on, and they carry along with them dummy ATM cards or credit cards or debit cards, and they try each and every ATM machine whether they respond to the card can be used fraudulently to draw money out of such machines. So those are new type of crimes. I don't hear any voice, any comment, any experience. Are you in a position to make a list of these unlawful activities and then use in your training, use in your on your day-to-day offices, supply to your front office guys or back office guys as a checklist? Okay, the seventh one, offenses committed against children. It is very well highlighted that a child become an adult at the age of 18, as practiced in Sri Lanka, as and most other countries. So these offenses, including the sale of small children for adoption, the popular name called for the child farm, isn't it? They use women to produce children, and then they advertise on the social sites availability of children for adoption. So such offenses, when those prospective parents who would want to adopt a child contact, they are asked for money. And the mother is given a small amount of money, but the organizer takes the majority land share. And those funds can be transferred through banking channels and deposited on bank accounts unless you are vigilant about it, or the source of transactions and source of money, motor transactions, you will not be able to highlight or identify them. So, and again, another angle is that child labor, children being used to perform various economic activities, and they may be paid a small amount of money. And there can be businesses run using these children as child laborers. Then offenses connected with the trafficking or smuggling of persons. Just last week, I was reading an international magazine where there are some countries who offer lucrative jobs, and when you are interviewed and then when you're selected, they give you airfare as well. And when you go there, the whereabouts of the person is lost or missing. They take the organs, human organs from such people in those countries, kidneys, heart, lungs, and that sort of things, and they trade on those human organs for $125,000 to $250,000, like that. So offenses connected with human trafficking and smuggling of persons has also taken a dangerous turn. Violation of the customs ordinance and any regulation, rule or order made, customs. Especially with regard to advance payment for import. I have seen many people, many organizations and many people producing the same performa invoice to make an advance payment to different institutions, and such items, such instances have also been reported through STR. So we are going to discuss the trade-related unlawful activities also in the next 2 slides. Then violation of excise ordinance, liquor. We heard that during these travel restrictions, online ordering of liquor was facilitated, but finally it was put to a stop. The excise ordinance is again highly regarded as a revenue earner to the government because of the high tax component involved in it. But at the same time, the liquor sales, which are going to create some harmful developments in the bodies who consume liquor, and the government is being required to provide free health services to cure those so-called liquor addicts or drug addicts. It is a question of whether maintaining the excise ordinance and then the liquor sales. But however, the regulations are being brought in to control it. But when you are properly speaking, those liquor sales probably are creating more drain of funds through the health sector for drugs and then treatment of patients. Then violation under the Payment Devices Frauds Act. Payment devices, fraudulent payments. Then violation under the National Environment Act. The environment disaster that was created by the burning ship. And various other environmental damages done in felling trees for timber or raping the forests. such activities has to be validated against each and every client or customers account relationships. In violation of the Companies Act number 7 of 2007, then violation of the Registered Stock on Securities Ordinance, that means the treasury bills and treasury bonds, violation under Securities and Exchange Commission Ordinance, violation of the Payment and Settlement Act, offences under any other law punishable by death or imprisonment. I have selected only 16 out of these unlawful activities, and the 17th one covers whatever I have missed out. And through the offences under any other law punishable by death or imprisonment becomes an unlawful activity. So, under consideration or tax evasion is though not a predicate offense in Sri Lanka as yet. But many other countries, tax evasion is a predicate offense. What do you think? Tax evasion should be made a predicate offense or not? Because tax money is supposed to be used for creating the infrastructure, roads, maintaining the peace through the police and other forces, and provision of health facilities through the hospital network, provision of free education through the school network, and so on and so forth. So for that, anybody who earns through use of such facilities must be paying a tax for the government to maintain such infrastructure facilities. So therefore, anybody trying to evade tax, evasion of tax, I think, in my opinion, should be dealt with as unlawful activity. So, Financial Transaction Reporting Act number 6 of 2006 and section 2.1 particularly says not to open, operate, or maintain an account when the account holder of that account cannot be identified. The account holder, there can be a name and address provided, but the beneficial owner could be somebody else. In the first place, banks and finance companies are made to ask for the name and account holder, and the person presented, the person presenting the account opening application should be the person who he or she is claiming to be. It cannot be a different person. Impersonation is a criminal offense. And why would a person forge the identity or give a different address? Is that there can be an intention of defraud or other malpractice, which can be used to divert public funds or accumulate public funds to beneficial owner who would use such funds for his or her personal benefit only. And the same section, subsection 3 says, identify each customer and verify customer identification data information as per KYC CDD, rule number 1 of 2011, Gazette Extraordinary number 1699/10 of March 28, 2011. So in that particular 2011 Gazette notification, also there is minimum standard information that is required to be recorded and used in account relationships. Amendment to above Gazette dated 4th May 2012. They are adding some more KYC information to be obtained. So these are the few legislative or requirements or regulatory aspects that you can use in your assignment. So please use them in your assignment. It's 2011 and 2012. Starting from 2006, FTRA section 2.1, 2.3, and then Gazette notification 2011 and Gazette notification of 2012. So further development, customer due diligence rule on 27th January 2016 on risk-based approach guidelines on 11th of January 2018 as well. Risk in relation to customer, country, product, service, transaction, and delivery channel has to be ascertained, evaluated, and used as a risk related or risk arising out of the customer relationship and business risk arising out of these relationships. In other words, these require the customer, product and services to be risk evaluated and particularly in the 2018 rule guidelines require these risks to be categorized into 4 categories: low risk, medium risk, high risk, and extremely high risk. So ideal situation is that this risk evaluation into these 4 risk categories and on a evaluated number so that the risk can be expressed in a numerical number. That will really help the employees plus the organization internally and the senior management and the board to evaluate the risk that they undertake. And on a separate angle, they can also evaluate the income of the profits generated out of such customer, such product, such service, and see whether those numbers, for example, 1 to 10, if you rank the risk, 1 as low risk and 10 as high risk. You can gather them in the low risk, medium risk, high risk, and extremely high risk. If you rank them 1, 2, 3 as low risk, 3 to 6 as medium risk, and then 7 to 9 as high risk, and 9 to 10 as the extremely high risk, then the employees, the senior management, the board of directors can very well look at who are the high risk, who are the extremely high risk customers, who are the high risk customers, and who are the medium risk customers, and who are the low risk customers. Such an evaluation will help manage on a day-to-day basis the business that is being conducted, focusing on extremely high risk and high risk customers more. They could be low in number. Say, for empirical studies have shown in a financial institution, low risk client base is something of like 75 to 80%. The medium risk customer base is around 10 to 15%. Then high risk customers is about 5%. And the extremely high risk customers could be about 2 to 3%. So if you take the extremely high risk customers 2 to 3% and then high risk customers 5%, you are talking of 7 or 8% of total customer base. Whereas low risk customers and medium risk customers will account for 90% or more, which is very safe business. And then the fact that they are low risk or medium risk, definitely their return to the institution could be more than the risk undertaken. So therefore, high risk customers and then extremely high risk customers can be focused more in the day-to-day managing the business. So it's going to be helpful to the board of directors, to the senior management, and the respective business units to focus on extremely high risk customers and high risk customers more, and make the return of them more than the extremely high risk or high risk number, and manage. Or else, if the return lower, they can work towards mitigating the risk and manage. Or else they can negotiate, initiate discussion, negotiate, and then enhance the return. So therefore, if by any chance the risk cannot be reduced anymore, and still the risk number is higher than the return number, they can look at a mechanism of de-risking or terminating or eliminating the risk relationship. So therefore, this is a very useful exercise of risk-based approach explained in these two guidelines in 2016 and 2018, of course, which are mandatory on the financial institutions, both banks and finance companies, to employ a mechanism of risk evaluation, identification, evaluation, and managing the risk numbers. One other factor is that the regulator is asking for the customer risk evaluation, the product risk evaluation, the services risk evaluation expressed in numerical number. And if you use the same 1 to 10 risk index, they can be collected, they can be merged, and then obtain a risk number for the entire organization, because there's similar risk from similar risk indexes. And then there can be a risk number to the every institution. Risk number, if it is more than 7, 8 or 9 or 10, it can be on the side of a high risk. And if the number is 5, 6 or 4, it can be medium risk. If the number is less than 3, it can be low risk. So the regulator, both the bank supervision, non-bank supervision, and also the FIU, wants the banks and finance companies to share with them these such evaluations numerically, so that they can program their supervision of the banks and finance companies on a more risk-based manner. Definitely high-risk numbers will be investigated more frequently, maybe twice, thrice a year, whereas low-risk numbers can be supervised, inspected at least once a year, so that we help the regulator also to streamline their work. And the other best benefit to the institution, the bank or finance company, is that the management is identified. Management could identify the high risk numbers and the low risk, medium risk numbers. Sorry, management could identify the high risk number and the extremely high risk numbers, which are 7 to 8% of the total customer base. And the total customer base, the high risk components only, high risk customers, high risk products, high risk services, and focus on them more and manage the risk, thereby increase the return on them as well. So managing in that fashion is more effective, and the institution would expect more practical results in this risk-based approach. So we'll be explaining the risk-based approach in the next few slides in the other presentation. So I told you that we will discuss finance-related activity or trade finance-related unlawful activities. Basic trade-based money laundering techniques are over and under invoicing of goods and services. What is over invoicing? The invoice value is inflated than the value of the consignment or goods. What is under invoicing? The invoice value is understated than the actual value of the consignment. Why would the importers or exporters would do that? They would want to avoid paying taxes, or in the case of over-invoicing, they would want to transfer the money transfer the laundered money, transfer the money earned through illegal sources by way of invoicing to the party exporting the goods, very often in another country, so that the laundered money are transferred easily to the other country by invoicing. Under invoicing is definitely to evade tax. Then multiple invoicing of goods and services. Same consignment is invoiced in multiple times. Again, to pass the laundered money or money through illicit origins. Over and under shipments of goods and services. Same thing. Over and under shipments of goods and services. Falsely described goods and services. Falsely described goods and services. Sometime back, there were garbage sent to Sri Lanka in few containers. I think it was from UK, indicating that the containers carry some goods which are being imported to this country. So falsely described goods and services. Complex trade-based money laundering techniques, black market peso exchange arrangement. Peso peso is a currency used in Argentina and then few South American countries. Colombian. So black market peso exchange is a operation. It's an operation that was highlighted, that was detected and highlighted to drug trafficking from Colombia to North America, United States of America, using peso brokers in the USA. And what they did was they sent the drugs through using one of these false described goods and services and various other trade-based money laundering techniques. And when they received the drugs in North America, there were the drugs were sold to various drug dealers, narcotic dealers, through this, because North America and USA are large, huge countries. So the Colombian peso brokers in USA then used the US dollars sale proceeds of narcotic drugs, and they exchange them to peso and send them back to Colombia, exchange peso for US dollars. And then this cartel, this ring of, it is a huge ring happening using underground operators. And when they were identified, the respective governments took steps to eradicate them. However, now we find in Sri Lanka as well, Now, yesterday or day before, they found 52 kilograms of narcotics. Definitely those dangerous drugs have been shipped by some country, huge international drug dealers, and they should be paid out of the sale proceeds of this in this country. So for that, there has to be use of facilitation by the banking system, banks or finance companies. So these are the examples of huge operations using the organized financial systems to pay for, to exchange value for dangerous drugs. So such mechanisms must be identified. Such mechanism must be identified and then mitigated or eradicated. And the information validation should be from the grassroots level operators of the participating institutions like banks and finance companies. And whereas the FIU, the narcotic control units, the law enforcement agencies such as police will depend heavily on the information that can be extracted by the banks and the finance companies and reported through maybe STR to the FIU and the law enforcement agencies. All right, so that's also done. Then we are going to the next slide presentation. Unfortunately, there are not even one question raised so far. So let me bring in another practical case studies. There are a few, 2 or 3 case studies. I just want to make you ask some questions. So scenario 1, question 1. Mr. Amal visits your branch to obtain a loan. He opens a savings account He submits his permanent address as an address which is in his NIC. So permanent address supplied by the customer Amal to open a savings account is exactly appearing in the NIC. After that, during the conversation with the manager, Mr. Amal says that he is living in a boarding house and no one is living in the permanent address supplied or appeared in the NIC. Would you keep his NIC address as the correspondent address? What will be answer? Would you want to keep the NIC address, although Amal says that no one is living there and he is living in Colombo, boarded at one house? Is it going to be useful to the bank to keep the address of the NIC address when there's no one is living in this permanent address? What would you say? This is what I explained as mindfulness. Just because regulations indicate to obtain an address, you obtain the address of the NIC as permanent address and open the account. But he himself discloses that no one is living in that permanent address, but he is in a different house. Will there be any use? Yes? What is your comment? Is there any help? Is there any assistance to your bank, your finance company, by retaining the correspondent address as the NIC address, just to facilitate the Amal opening savings account?
You can ask him to submit the billing proof of where he is living.
Just billing proof where he is living. Okay,
yes,
okay.
Currently.
Okay. Yes, can do. My question is, would you accept and keep the NIC address as a correspondent address? Because just you would not. Just because whatever the correspondence, whatever the correspondence that you send from your bank to the permanent address or the NIC address is not going to reach the customer unless he visits that place and he says that no one is living in that house, in that address. So the usefulness is not the answer to this particular question. The correspondent address would be the boarding house address, which is quite rightly said that it should be proved with a billing proof. So what are the risks to the financial institution or the bank if the permanent address is retained, or are there any other risks in this scenario? Are there any other risks to the bank or the finance company? Because it is said that the customer is living in a boarding house. In other words, it says it's a temporary accommodation, isn't it? Temporary accommodation. And as said, he might not be able to provide billing proofs also, because in a boarding house, the utility bills, the electricity or the water bills might not carry his name unless the owner of the boarding house, landlord, gives a certification that so and so is boarded in that particular house. So what are the risks? What are the risks for the bank or the finance company in such scenario? Is there a risk or not? Most practically, yes.
Bank has a risk, sir, but thing is that whenever he changes boarding address, boarding house, he has to inform the bank. No?
Yes, true. I think we are scratching the surface. You must look at the risk deep into it. And this says, the first line says, Mr. Amal visits your branch to obtain a loan. And as a first step, he opened a savings account. And as you quite rightly said, if the bank is going to consider a loan, disbursing of a loan to this particular customer, after having disbursed the loan, for the recovery and then other aspects, he may not be raised at the boarding house if he has changed the temporary accommodation, and if he got the permanent address, the bank is going to be looking up high and dry to locate the customer, isn't it?
Yes.
Unless he visits the branch
Mm.
or bank.
When
So
recoveries are, I mean, if he defaults, there may be an issue to the bank.
that is true. And then unless you are ready to employ a criminal investigation or private detective company to locate the person,
Yeah.
there is going to be because as I discussed last Sunday or Sunday before last, that for asset customer, a loan customer compared to a liability customer, the deposit, savings account and current account or fixed deposit customer, there is a great impact on the KYC to be obtained. One of them is the correct location, correct contactability. Because if you dip into further depth of this risk, it can be that the customer, after having obtained the loan, and if he defaults, the bank recoveries department or the loan administration department may not be able to file or institute legal action without proper address. Without proper address, they may not be in a position to initiate legal action. So this is going to be a really difficult situation unless you verify the permanent address and boarding address, whatever, and if he is related to any employment, probably employment address, and finally a proven correspondent address must be obtained, because the bank should be in a position to communicate with the customer very effectively in the recovery process, because bank has lent him money deposited by other customers, and as a trustee for other customers for their money deposited with the bank cannot escape the liability for having lent money to Amal if they are unable to be recovered. So, third question: what further actions you would take? What further actions you would take? What are the further actions? What further actions that you would take?
So if the Amal's official office bearers take the responsibility of his permanent address or the temporary address, and they are giving some guarantee of the Amal's job opportunity, we can offer the loan considering the guarantee of his office bearers.
Yes. Okay. You are, in other words, the Amal's employer's confirmation, isn't it?
Yes, of the employee's confirmation with reference to that employer's confirmation, we can offer the loan facility for the Amal.
Okay. That's also one way. But again, Amal is also possible. There's a possibility that Amal can change employment as well, right? There is a possibility that Amal can change.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, that leaves one way of contactability. Then I would also suggest to get his telephone number, email address, and whatever other social media contactability numbers and connectivities, so that in the event customer Amal changes employment, does not reside in the permanent address, and all other means of contactability fails, email address, mobile phone address, such things can help the bank. And then also haven't you seen some bank resorting to asking the name and address of close relative not living with you? Have you seen such instances? Yes. Names and addresses of close relatives not living with you. So the banks are trying to create some other avenue of possibly contacting in the event that this person is unable to be contacted. So merely not because of the regulations stipulation to obtain the name and address, probably this, to open savings account, the NIC address was obtained just to facilitate that, to facilitate the regulatory prescription. But however, in the conversation with the manager only, it was highlighted that he is not living in that permanent address, but he is in a boarding house. So such information is vital to obtain the full gamut of or impact of the KYC to be obtained.
Sir,
Yes.
isn't it necessary to have a consent or a confirmation with the Amal's boarding house owner?
Yes, that's
Will
one
this
way.
be you?
Correct. That's what I said first. I said the landlord of Amal to confirm in writing that he lives in that house, in his house as a boarder, and so that in case at a later stage, if Amal cannot be located, through the landlord, an attempt could be made to locate him. If Amal leaves the landlord's boarding house, there's possibility that the landlord might know where he has gone, which address. There's a possibility. At the same time, if Amal is employed to obtain the employer's confirmation, so that if Amal is unable to be contacted, then through the employer, there is a possibility that Amal could be contacted. Even if Amal had left employment, sometimes there's a possibility that the employer would have recorded the new employment contact of Amal. So those are the precautions that normally a lending institutions take place. So other than the email address, mobile phone numbers, social media contact numbers, and so forth. And the close relative living, not living with him is also another helpful angle, right? So that is to mitigate the risk of contactability to the customer. So there are various other risks that to be identified and mitigated. Although the regulation prescribes address, permanent address, correspondent address, we as financial industry practitioners must do things with understanding and with mindfulness. That's why I use mindfulness in the assignment. All right. Okay, next scenario. Mr. Saman opens savings account with your branch. Last week, he visited the branch 4 times to deposit money. On 8th of February, 8:45 a.m., deposited 500,000. Again, on the same day, 12:30 afternoon, deposited 500,000 money. Next day, he visited at 10:45 a.m. and deposited 400,000. Again, on the same day, 2:30 p.m., he deposited 650,000 money. So, how much here? 1,150,000, 2,150,000, isn't it? Total for the 2 days. Teller identified that the customer is not behaving like others. It's not normal behavior. This customer's annual income mentioned as rupees 1 million in the customer profile. Annual income 1 million. He deposits 2,150,000 on 2 days from 8 to 10. Right? He is a manager for a private company. Would there be a risk to the bank from the activities of this customer? Would there be a bank from the activities of this customer? First, need to be updated.
Yes,
First of
it is a
all,
risk.
yes.
Yes, it is a
Yes.
risk for the bank. Normally we take the depositing purpose or for the deposits for over 200,000. If
Yes.
they after checking the reasons, if there are any fraud, if we found that if it's a fraud or something, it is better to first of all we have to inform to the manager and the cash officer. After that, with the help of them, we can have a look for his company or something related to his company. What is the business or the other things happens in that company, or if he is a manager, we should have to inform. We can have a look with the accountant or someone. What is the things happening with there? If not, if even we couldn't find out the reason of that, it's better to have a STR or something.
Yeah. Those are very practical steps that you would take. I think first of all, there need to be a comparison between the customer profile that have been submitted to the bank.
You should carry out CDD and update KYC.
Yes, that's true.
He must be trying to avoid the 1 million threshold deposit reporting and do it in tranches.
Yeah, that's another possibility. But is there a fundamental lack of information here? The customer has declared that his annual income is 1 million. In the customer profile KYC data recorded, his annual income is indicated 1 million. But whereas in 2 days, he is depositing 2,150,000. So there is a severe misinformation here. So therefore, when the 1 million expected for an entire year, within 2 days, if any deposit 2,150,000, definitely we need to reach out to the customer and then ask for the additional information source of income. And then where did he generate the additional funds? Very well, he can come out with that, I sold my car, I sold my motorbike, I sold my land, I sold my house, or some other things. Or else he could have very well started another business while being employed at the private company as a manager. He could have also started another business angle, another business avenue, maybe using his family members. So he's using this account to process or deposit and then bank the sale proceeds of that, probably the family business. It's a possibility, isn't it? Or else, on the negative side, it could be a possibility that he is collecting money from the donors, like what I said a while ago, that there are social media activities soliciting donations to help the COVID affected families or flood affected families. So, and whereas their monies are deposited to his own personal account. So those are irregular activities. So, which has to be brought to the high notice of the FIU or the law enforcement agencies. So, but on the other hand, if it is a positive reflection where the customer, whilst being employed as a manager of the private company, if he has started some other business, employing his children or wife or father-in-law, mother-in-law, mother, father, anybody, and then if he is depositing the sale proceeds to his account, then definitely that also needs updating of his customer profile, and then further intensive discussions by your relationship managers or marketing officers with the customer to ascertain the legality or whether illegal business or legality of the business. And if they are all legal businesses, economic activities, they can be supported. Your bank can give them a lease facility, you can give them a loan facility, you can give them a temporary overdraft, and support the family. Enhance the cross-selling of products. So those are the course of action that you could take. But at the same time, to the question of would there be a risk to the bank from the activities of this customer? Yes, there is definitely a risk until identification whether the illegal activities are taking place or not. Then the misinformation or the inadequate information about the customer KYC information should be definitely immediately updated, and the compliance department and the risk department, whatever the operation department, must be notified that there's a such customer existing, and he has originally declared annual income is 1 million, whereas he has deposited 2,150,000 for 2 days. So activities must be followed up. Any other comment?
So in this kind of situation,
Yes.
if he said that he has sold something, is that just enough, or we have to ask any proof of selling that thing?
Yes, now as bankers with average intelligence, we must be fully convinced that actually what he is telling is the truth. To ascertain the truth, there can be various other actions, including visiting the site or asking the proof of if it is a sale of a vehicle or sale of a property, there can be legal documentary proof, right? Without arousing the customers suspicion or about the bank, and without making him inconvenient, or else I think the easiest course of action should be to use a staff member to visit the customer in his location and to see whether the actual things are transpired in the manner in his statement or indication. All right.
So one more question, please.
Yes.
So these days, most of the people are carrying out online businesses like Bitcoin, finance.
Yes.
Is there any regulation, central bank regulation regarding that? Because we have observed some unusual patterns of deposits on those accounts, but I have no idea if it is prohibited from central bank or.
Yes. Now the cryptocurrency Bitcoins are not permitted so far in Sri Lanka, isn't it? Central bank has not approved, not permitted Bitcoin or cryptocurrency transactions. But I agree with you that there are a lot of online business activities being done. So the negotiations or discussions with the customer can only highlight such activity. Online businesses, business activities can be whether they are thereafter only you can ascertain the legality of such businesses. So Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies, to my knowledge, central bank has not permitted so far for anybody to, any Sri Lankan to do any Bitcoin or cryptocurrency business. Central bank has not permitted so far. All right, any other comment? No?
That means if they are telling directly that they are doing such business, can we do a STR?
Before STR, you must do the proper investigation, my dear. There should be a proper investigation, and the facts must be established. And if you are sure that the business activity, online business activity, or whatever the activity that he does for additional income generation, is if they are positive and then there is no contradiction with the legal provisions, and there are no harmful effect of the economy or your institution or any other entity, then I don't think there's a necessity to submit an STR. But the STR should be submitted only if the activity carried out on online business or whatever is a illegal nature, not permitted nature. Then definitely you should be very tactful in ascertaining the facts from the customer with proof, and then you can go for STR. That is true. But I know certain financial institutions, customers who do such illegal activities, then they try to negotiate with them and then try to make them legal business activity. If that is not possible, only those institutions resort to STR. But for whatever said and done, if the activity is illegal and if there is harmful nature for the society and any stakeholder in the society, might as well submit a STR. True, because then the FIU and the law enforcement agencies can structure events and the regulations to prohibit such illegal activity, or if they consider that such activity is not illegal, to make them legalize. That is also possible. All right. Shall we discuss the next slide? Scenario 3, without an introducer, your salesperson asks you to open a current account. Now, to open a current account, you normally you normally need an introduction, isn't it? So without an introducer, your own sales department, the marketing department asks you to open a current account. You are not aware about the customer or customer's background. Would you open the current account for the customer? And if you open it, what are the risks for the bank? You would have opened the savings account, isn't it? Does the savings account need an introduction? No. But to open a current account, you need an introduction. Does anyone have a comment? Why is the... Yes.
So, without introduction, we cannot. We are not do the opening of the account. No, it should.
Current account.
Current account, yes, not the savings account. Current account.
Yeah. Why would you think that? Why is that the legal requirement to ask for an introduction for a current account only? What is the reason?
The reason is the proof of the business and everything. I mean, like the customer background should be introduced by a introducer.
So why for current account only, not for savings account?
That current accounts normally open for the business purposes also, not for the savings purposes.
But saying that if a customer wants you to open a savings account only and he does business, they're going to accommodate?
No.
Why not?
Now, the savings account for savings purposes fine, but if it is a current account only, this problem arises.
I'm sure there are many business persons operating through savings account.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, they are doing.
So why is that the legal requirement to ask for introducer only for savings current accounts?
No, it's because there is a regulation there as per the section 60 of Bills of Exchange Act. There is introduction has to be obtained, otherwise the bank is liable for conversion.
Correct. You're halfway through. Do you have an understanding why is that? What is the technical point?
We accept checks for current accounts.
Accept checks as to be deposited in the current account. Yes. Further step. All right. Now the fundamental difference between savings account and current account is, as someone said just a while ago, savings account savings, and money can be deposited only by him, and there no instruments, no financial instruments other than his own instruments cannot be deposited to savings account. And if you come across any check to be deposited to savings account, the manager or the senior person has to interview and then ascertain the full facts and authorize that, isn't it? Then for current account, open a current account is for business, and that is automatically enabled to deposit checks received by your client from other parties in the economy, other parties in the society. So as a collecting banker, I think sections 82 or something in the Bills of Exchange Act or the Banking Act, the collecting bank responsibility is to take all meaningful actions to prevent conversion, prevent other people's money to be collected to your customer's account. So that is the point. Now, when you open a current account, you are permitting your customer to deposit checks and other instruments which are issued by others in the society who may be your non-customers. You may not know their signatures, you may not know their wealth or source of income, and even the mere existence of the other party issue of the check, you may not be aware. So therefore, you need an introduction from another customer of yours or a reputed person in the society, like a justice of peace or a school principal or chief priest of a temple or a church or an income taxpayer. Sometimes they has to introduce this particular customer as a person who's a genuine person and honest and is suitable to open and maintain a current account. Meaning you are identifying your risk that the financial instruments belonging to others are going to be deposited to this account, and that he would not deposit in financial instruments belonging to other beneficial owners to his current account. To mitigate that risk only, the section 60 of Bills of Exchange Act requires to obtain an introducer. So therefore, the answer to the question, would you open the current account for your customer? The direct answer is going to be no, unless the salesperson who asks you to open the account signs as introducer, if he's eligible, because most institutions, if the person is introducing in the same staff member of the employee of the same bank, they won't permit some of the institutions. But if he is willing to, otherwise, if he is willing to take the responsibility, he can sign. But saying that, if your customer deposited a check belonging to somebody else and you become liable for tort of conversion, and your bank is unable to go behind the introducer and then sue the introducer. But you have to locate the customer who obtained the money using your own account and then make good that money to the true owner of the funds. The introducer responsibility is only to probably introduce, and then he take the responsibility only to identify such a person as a true and honest person, and maybe that in an eventual happening, he can help you to locate the person if he is unable to be located. Only to that extent. So those are the risks that the bank faces if you open an account, current account, with introduction. All right. Okay, that's the end of that presentation series also. So we have come to the time limit as well. So next Sunday, we can meet and then discuss the risk-based approach further. I have other slide presentation for that. But since the government has relaxed the travel restrictions from 4 a.m. tomorrow, and sometimes may not be reimposed covering next Sunday, most likely that Mr. Rupa Singh might be able to take his sessions, 2 or 3 sessions, starting from next Sunday. So if not, if he is willing, if he is going to take, we'll allow him. Otherwise, we'll continue next Sunday as well at the same time, 9 to 1 o'clock. Any more questions from anyone?
Excuse me, sir. Could you please share your email address with us?
Yes, it is in that. Assignment document.
Is it there? I couldn't find it. Wait, I see.
It is in the assignment documents. Anyway, it is Premasiri Ratnayaka at yahoo.com.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, it is in the assignment document, right? Yes. Any other question, please? Any other question or any session that we conducted or any compliance matter?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Can we go back to the scenario number 2?
Scenario number 2.
Yeah. From bank's perspective, can we just wait a little while till customer comes up with a valid reason before filing STR?
Assignment number 2, Saman, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your question is?
Can we just wait another 2 or 3 weeks before we file STR?
Yeah, if the submission of STR is required.
Yeah. Just to see behavior of the account.
No, but I think there's a limiting factor about STR. The FTRA regulation is 48 hours, within 48 hours of the rising of suspicion. 48 hours is just 2 days, isn't it? So I think if you are suspected, if you suspect that the customer is resorting to illegal way of earning, if you are suspecting the customer has generated these funds through illegal sources, I would suggest STR is a confidential document anyway. Given the full facts, you submit the STR, because why would you want to wait for another 1 or 2 weeks if already suspicious activity has taken place? Because of the fact that the customer had indulged in the suspicious activity, he will have to face the consequences. But at the same time, customer will not know that the STR was submitted by you or your bank or your finance company. Because submitting a STR is not only to highlight the fact that such an activity had taken place with your customer, but to also to highlight to the FIU and the law enforcement agencies that such level of such activity can take place in the society, and for them to initiate legal provisions for prevention of such illegal activity in the future as well. So that's what I suggest, that without if it is proved that customer is resorting to illegal activities, I wouldn't suggest waiting 1 or 2 weeks, because one thing is that legal provision, 48-hour limit is there. Second thing is that taking everything positive, and also due to the fact that your name or your bank's name or your finance company's name will not be shared with the customer or anybody else. And it is all the more positively placed to report such STR to prevent such things happening in the future, not only with your customer, but with somebody else as well.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
After we raise a TRA, after 1 week time, we'll found the customer is genuine. So do we need to inform that to again, and is there any impact to customer or bank?
Yes. Now, if you're suspecting and then you're raising an STR, then finally your subsequent investigations probably we are going to reveal that it is not a suspected activity, is it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So yeah, definitely in such a situation, the fresh information you must submit. But still, your anonymity or your reporting is not going to be shared with the customer. So therefore, you are safe, but at the same time, you are going to not only protect your customer, but also you are going to help the FIU and the law enforcement agencies, the new information that you gathered. So a lot of difficulty or lot of activity that is going to incur to the FIU or law enforcement agency, you are going to relieve them of that activity burden, isn't it? So you do things, but your question is whether there could be a bad image on you or your bank, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So for having done the correct thing, firstly reporting the suspicious activity when you suspected it, and then you're informing them that the is not anymore suspected, its activity is okay. That again, you're supplying good information to them. I don't think anyone can find fault with you. In fact, you can build up a good relationship with them, saying that you are very agile and you are very inquisitive, and then you are also mindful about the cost and activities of FIU and the law enforcement as well. Okay. Any more questions, please? Hello? Yes?
Excuse me, sir. On the assignment question, facilitating customer transactions,
Yes.
what would be the content? As in, like, what would the content should be? What are the areas that we have to cover on that topic?
Facilitating customer transactions.
Yeah.
Now that is going to be your prime duty, isn't it? As a financial institution, you have to facilitate customer transactions.
Yeah.
In other words, facilitating customer transactions in the most cost-effective manner and most effective manner, right? At the same time, when you do that, if you observe any negative aspect of your customers' behavior or source of funds, that can be highlighted. At the same time, choosing the cost-effective and then the efficient mode of transaction method is going to enhance your image of your bank, and then happen that new business can be generated of the same customer or customers who would look at you after hearing from your customer by word of mouth. There can be more and more businesses that are coming up. But I suggested that subheading soon after the mindfulness, because knowing the gravity and the totally understanding the KYC information of that particular customers, and then finally accommodating the customer on the most cost-effective manner and efficient manner, that is going to enhance your reputation. So if you can convert those ideas into simple words, I think that's going to be a successful assignment.
Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, sir, when it comes to the regulation and parliamentary acts, so there are main 3 acts, and like, do we have to give, give those 3 plus the other acts as well, or?
Yes, you can make a list of parliament acts and regulation on those parliament acts, no? So
And plus, one presentation I showed the Exchange Control Act as well when it comes to the compliances.
Yes, that's right.
So we have to list all the parliamentary acts.
Yes, that's going to help you to in your writing of the other paragraphs, subsequent paragraphs. If you have listing of the parliament acts and the regulations, by looking at it, you will know what to write on the subsequent paragraphs, isn't it?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
So I do have the same question. Do we have to mention about money laundering and terrorist finance acts also? They are related with KYC and CDD. Is that essential?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Do we have to mention about money laundering and terrorist financial acts also regulation?
Yes, because now particularly KYC, CDD, and EDD starts from Financial Transaction Reporting Act number 6 of 2006, isn't it? Section 2. And there are subsequent gazette notifications and regulation issued by the FIU, and also bank supervision and non-bank supervision. So those parliament acts, if you mention it, that's good, really good. It will help your assignment. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Any other question, please? So if there are no other question, we can call it a day. So as I said, next Sunday we will meet if Mr. Rupasinghe is not present, but if he's going to start classes, we'll meet after his research on the next meeting. So good luck, and then please submit your assignments by 1st of June.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.